Great, excellent. Welcome everybody to the CHAIN seminar series. Tonight we're very happy to have Professor Hazucha here from the Graduate School of Law here at Hokkaido University, but currently at Max Planck in Germany. And he's going to be talking to us about some recent advances in artificial intelligence and some of the new and interesting challenges that artificial intelligence is creating for thinking about artistic creativity and copyright law.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. I'm really honored to be here and to present this particular research paper, which I have been asked to write for a book. And I was thinking that, well, it might be worth to share those insights with other people. And I'm always doing a bit cross-disciplinary research. So I was thinking that it might be worth to receive some feedback from people with having different perspective on this particular topic. And I was thinking that that was the reason why I asked Professor Taguchi whether it would be possible to present this research paper on this venue. And I think that I don't need to explain to most of you all the progress with artificial intelligence over the last 20, 30 years. So I just collected some main news which has been published in newspapers over the last 20, 30 years. So in 1997, most of you might remember that there was a big news how computer has won over world champion in chess. And well, although it was quite difficult, but still in a few years later, in 2011, we had even news about IBM Watson's machine won in a Jeopardy, which was based more on natural language processing. It was not only about processing all the possible moves, how it was in chess game. And even more recently, you might notice news about Google's AlphaGo's system, which has won over Korean master in Go game, which is even more complicated and require even more computational power to do so. And I have read recently a couple of other news dealing with how AI is used in medicine, how this technology is more efficient than experts in this area, who have really long years of practicing. So AI is used in detecting cancer from various MRI or CT scans. There was recently news from China how AI technology is used for examining patients in coma, and how the technology can predict whether the conditions of patients will improve within the period of 1 year, which is really impossible to do it for for individuals, for doctors. And regularly NASA is publishing various news, how AI is used for space exploration, for analyzing huge data sets they collected over the last 10, 20 years, where AI is used for searching for new planets, stars. So we could see that there has been really significant progress in AI technology. But my today's presentation will focus on different areas, how artificial technology is used in culture production. For example, in 2016, there was a project called Bach, where researchers put together AI system which was generating Bach-style choral music. So it was based on data set, which was a collection of choral composition composed by a famous German composer. And then they even try to ask general public whether they can see any difference. And over 80% of respondents could not really distinguish what was the music which was composed originally by Bach and the music which was generated by this program. the same in 2016. There was another project based in Netherlands, which was a cooperation between Microsoft and several Dutch institutions. There was a university, two galleries and museums, and financial institution. And what they focused on was to generate a painting which would really resemble a painting painted by famous Dutch painter, in this case Rembrandt. It was based on analysis of his painting, and the whole system identified of a couple of thousands of specific aspects which are very typical for Rembrandt, and based upon these commonalities, at the end they were able to generate a new painting which really resemble famous paintings painted by Rembrandt. And this is not only about the picture as such, but this is even that you can see the whole brush strokes, that it really looked like a painting painted by a human. And more recently, there was even the previous projects much more look on the way of generating either music in style of someone or paintings in style of someone. But the project which I'm going to present is more about a new type of a painting, which was purely generated by AI technology. This project was based on so-called generative adversarial network, where you have two computers working against each other. On one side, there is a computer which is generating something, and then you have the computer which is judging based upon certain parameters. And through this cooperation of these two computers, over time, the generative computer is more or less learning how he should create something, how he should generate certain kind of compositions. And the whole study was based on 15,000 portrait paintings from 14th to 19th century. And in this case, the presenting painting is called Edmond de Bellamy painting, which was even auctioned. And it was auctioned for quite significant price, almost $500,000 American dollars. So this brought a lot of headlines in newspapers that, well, AI can be artists. Is this really art, or is this something different? But the amount as such is quite significant, as you can see, almost $500,000 American dollars. And even more recently, I have read just a few days ago about a project where AI was used for completing unfinished composition wrote by Beethoven, which was the 10th symphony, which was not completed by him, but that a scientist has been able to more or less complete this composition. And so this brings a lot of issues dealing with the impact of AI on cultural production and possibly AI's impact on copyright law. So as to impacts on cultural production, so first of all, it brings significant production cost reductions. So you don't need to spend, for example, 1 month painting a painting, for which you will have to need to pay to someone. You need to spend time, you need to spend all painting and so on. And this brings even other aspects about the relationship between human authors and artificial intelligence technologies used for generating various kind of cultural products. So this might be, as we had 150 years ago or 200 years ago, we had the fight between workers in factories and machines, that machines are stealing the work of workers. So you had even riots where people were destroying these machines because they considered it that it will steal their job. On the other hand, the machine has been used more or less to more efficiently use the work to improve the whole production, to reduce production costs, and in that way also for consumers, provide them the access to the goods which were on more reasonable price level. And at the end, what I want to discuss in today's presentation is also what might be the possible impact of AI on human creativity. That it might not only change the whole culture of production, but it might even to a certain degree impact human creativity as such. And from the perspective of copyright law, well, there are two approaches which you can find in literature, and you have authors who are more or less arguing that, well, the AIs should have the works which are generated by AI technologies should be protected by copyright law or some other kind of legal protection. And on the other hand, you have persons who are arguing that all these works which are generated by AI technologies should be left in public domain, that they should enrich public domain, and in that way encourage more creativity by humans. So that's also partially what I want to address by my presentation, to what extent we should more or less try to accommodate these results into the current law, or we should just leave it as it is and just leave it unprotected. But before starting with these issues, I will just say a few things as to the artificial technology, which most of you might be familiar with. So what has been the factors behind all these changes over the last 20, 30 years? So one important aspect is that there has been considerable increase in computing powers of computers. Nowadays, everyone has a mobile phone, which has the computing power, which is much higher than computers, for example, 10, 20 years. I remember 30 years when I've seen first computers, they did not have such high computing power comparing to the devices which we these days use on a daily basis. Another aspect is availability of huge data sets, which are produced by various kind of online service providers available on the internet. It's a very easy collect data, for example, just by scraping websites and so on. And finally, there is a huge financing in this area, because these days there is discussion that we are entering into a new revolution, a new information revolution, that as we had 150 years, 200 years, we had industrial revolution, we have a new type of revolution, which will be in the area of artificial intelligence. And it's expected quite significant increase as to the investment in this area and the development of a new type of services and products in this field. Another aspect which will be very important for our discussion is the issue about the machine learning. So to what extent humans are still involved in the creative process, in the generation of the works by AI technologies. As you might be familiar, we have several types of machine learning depending upon the involvement of individuals. So on one side, we have supervised machine learning, and on the other side, we have completely unsupervised, where the machine does not need to have standardized data, that the machine can, through the various kind of analysis, can by itself determine what is this data set, what are the factors affecting the variations in the data set, and come to the outcome of the analysis by itself, which might to significant degree affect the legal analysis, how the works generated by AI technologies should be should be assessed from the perspective of the current copyright law. And another aspect deals with the natural language processing, which helps us to process human language by machines. It helps analyze text. And it's also, well, it's still in the progress. So at the moment, various kind of chatbots are used for analyzing text, searching for answers to various kind of questions. But still, there needs to be a certain degree of progress for generating longer types of literary works. So we will not have novels having a couple of hundred of pages in next few years, but still there are already technologies which allow to generate shorter literary works, shorter news, shorter text, or analyzing various kind of literary compositions. So how the works generated by AI technologies are currently treated by the law, and what are the views presented by various kind of scholars in this field. And there are more or less two approaches. On one side, you have a group of scholars who are saying there should be no copyright protection for these creations. And on the other side, there is a group of scholars who are arguing that there should be protection, that these works should be for various kind of reasons protected. And either the current copyright law can already deal with this situation or should be modified to a certain degree. So what are the arguments against any kind of protection of the works generated by AI technologies? So a classical argument is that, well, AI technology as such has no desire to have any intellectual property rights. It's a machine, and it does not need to be stimulated by rights. Usually with human creators, we always argue that, well, we should bribe to a certain degree composers, writers, artists, that if they don't have any protection of the result of their creative work, that they will not create. But in the case of AI technology, there's no need really of any stimulation. Another argument is that, well, we should just leave this creation in public domain, and it will enrich the current public domain, which is freely accessible to anyone. And in this way, it can lead to enrichment and making incentive for human creators, that the individuals can just go take this creation and use them, recreate them for creating new types of literary or artistic works. Another argument which is often used is that if we provide legal protection, if we grant rights to AI technologies, that this can more or less denigrate human authors, that human authors might feel that they are treated in the same way as a machine, that they spend certain amount of time to produce those works, they had to have some training, they tried hard, it took them certain time to create it. And on the other hand, machine can quite easily to create the similar kind of creation, and is even provided by rights. And another argument which is often used goes that, well, AI should have no legal personality, that it is not a subject which can have some rights or liabilities. And it is often pointed out to famous infinite monkey theorem, which is based on the argument that, well, if you put a monkey somewhere with computer and the monkey just pushing to the button, that if it takes infinite time, so that monkey can write, for example, Hamlet or some other famous literary works. In reality, it does not work in this way. You had experiments with monkeys and computers, but at least in theory is that on randomness, that if someone is randomly pushing buttons on keyboard, that over a certain time that the monkey, or even in the individual who is not really thinking, by randomness can write a few words which make some sense, or can write even some sentences. So that's the whole argument. The current situation is, and this would be really the problem, especially for civil law jurisdictions, which means we are talking about continental European countries, for example, as Germany, France, or Italy, or the countries which are historically related with those countries, either former colonies, or the countries like Japan, Korea, or China, which were inspired by these continental traditions. And the problem of civil law jurisdictions is that they consider authors only as individuals. Only humans can be authors. Not even legal entities can be authors. But this is not only a problem of civil law jurisdiction, this is also a problem of the countries which are mainly English-speaking countries, and whose legal traditions originate from Great Britain and the United States, North America. When we look to the United States, current situation is that US Copyright Office reject the copyright registrations of any works which has not been created by humans. There has been an attempt to register compositions, music compositions generated by computers already from 1950s, and all these attempts has been rejected by US Copyright Office. Although copyright registration is not necessary for receiving copyright, but it's important for enforcing rights in the United States before the courts. So we can see that this is not really only a problem of civil law jurisdictions, but even the countries coming from common law traditions like the United States face very similar issues. So on the other hand, the persons who are arguing that there should be some protection provided to the works which are generated by AI technologies, they point out often that, well, this is important to stimulate investment in AI technologies, that no one will develop something where there will be no market for those technologies. And if we want to more stimulate the investment and progress in these fields, then it's important to provide protection to the results which are generated by these technologies. And it's worth to create a market. And if there is a market, people will more or less invest, and the market will lead to further development in this area. But counter-argument is that when we look on current AI projects, most of these AI projects are open source. So that's they are open, and it's everyone can more or less use those various kind of libraries available online under certain conditions of particular licenses, open source licenses. Another argument might be that, well, we had something similar a couple of years ago, currently decades ago in European Union, where in the early days of digital databases, there was an argument that, well, the protection should be provided to these various kind of databases. Otherwise, there will be no progress. And that was the reason why European Union has provided a special sui generis rights to non-original databases in order to stimulate the local industry. And there was the European Union was more or less pushing to become the leader in this field. But over 2 decades of the practice of this system in European Union, we can still see that the European industries are far behind US industries in this field. And when we look to the United States, non-original databases are not protected in the United States. In the United States, they use various kind of contract-based types of protection. Secrecy, anyone who wants to use has to sign certain licensing agreements, and they use also certain kind of technological protection measures. And when you look on the current situation in the United States, there's not really any argument that there should be a protection provided to databases. They more or less feel that the current situation in the United States is more or less sufficient, and the whole industry is more or less thriving in the United States comparing to the situation in the European Union. So which might imply that, well, there might be other factors than just providing protection to the results of certain endeavors, so that intellectual protection might not be always necessary. That whether there is protection or not, that it does not really affect. That there might be other factors, for example, like the whole Silicon Valley phenomenon that a lot of countries tries to more or less emulate it with moderate success. So you can find certain areas also in Japan very similar, like area around Kyoto, or in other countries where you have the whole cooperation between the universities and the local industries, that you have highly educated individuals available for those industries, and the whole culture in this field. So what are the arguments in this field? So when you look, that there are several persons who are arguing to the point that, well, what is important to change in copyright law is to change the whole idea of creativity. In order to receive copyright protection, the work which has been created has to be creative. And the creativities always argue that that human labor is creative when it's not routine, when it's not mundane, when it's not mechanical. And this goes really completely against the work which is conducted by AI technology, which is to a certain degree mechanical, which is based on certain routine and so on. So there is argument that the current law bases the requirements for providing copyright protection on creativity, which is linked to the human factor, that only humans can be creative, and that this should be changed by law. Another aspect which is pointed often by scholars from common law jurisdictions is that, well, we don't need to change the current copyright law, that the current copyright law is already providing us with certain mechanisms. And it's always pointed out to so-called work for hire doctrine, which is, well, each country has this doctrine, but common law jurisdictions have a different applications of this doctrine. The work for hire allows that the employer can acquire initially copyrights. So in this case, when the work is created by hired employee, so the copyright holder, the initial copyright holder, is the employer, is the company. So when someone is working for the university or is working for a company, and he produced something, either literary or artistic work, as a part within the employment, as a part of his employment, the initial copyright holder is his employer, not the employee who created it. In civil law jurisdictions, the situation is the opposite, so that the initial copyright holder is always the author, but the employer can exercise the rights. So there is more or less a statutory license that the employer can exploit, can use those rights, can license those rights and so on. So the employee is not really able to exercise those rights, but he is initial copyright holder. The problem of this argument is that, well, this is more or less switching the whole issue from copyright law to the contractual or contract law. From the perspective of the copyright law, we don't need to really care whether the author, whether the AI technology will have some legal capacity, whether it can be considered as a subject of legal relationship. We just need to really look whether this is a work for hire, whether this work was created by hired employee or it was created by independent contractor. But still in contract law, you have to determine that when you are determining whether someone is hired employee or someone is independent contractor, you have to really look on the relationship between the person who ordered creation of particular work and the person who created it. So whether someone was employee, was employed by someone, or was just independent creator, because in case of independent creators, the work for hire is not applicable anymore. The last argument, which is often presented in the literature, is that, well, even if the work for hire would not be applicable, we still have contractual solutions. So there might be some contracts, as we can see it currently, as was mentioned in United States with databases. That same contractual relationship can be used for solving these problems, that the person who is selling the technology can just provide some license for the user, and they can determine in the contract who will be the right holder of the rights, of the copyrights to the works which are generated by the technologies. So the contracts can solve everything. It can bring legal certainty. The problem with contractual solutions with this private ordering is that the contracts are accessible only to the parties of the contract. So only the person who is marketing AI technologies and the users who purchase it from those from the developers, from the persons who are marketing AI technologies. So these entities, they know what is the contract, they know who is the right holder, under what kind of conditions and so on. But the third parties had no idea that this can bring more legal uncertainty and difficulty with forcibility, how to deal with this work, who can license us this work, can we use this work freely, or do we need to have some license to use those works? So it can bring a lot of issues for the third parties, which might be solved by providing some kind of copyright notices. So especially in common law jurisdiction in the United States, it's very popular that when you want to claim for certain kind of remedies, you should put some copyright notice on that work. So that's the reason when you have books at the beginning of the book, you have the sign of C in circle with the right holder and with the year of publication. So this is the classical way that the users can more or less use in the same way in order to identify who is the right holder, that this kind of result is protected by copyright, and that this might bring some kind of clarity in the whole issue. The problem is that a lot of countries more or less abolish all these formality requirements. So it used to be very popular in the past, but over the last 100 years, thanks to the international harmonization, all the formalities as to acquiring copyrights has been abolished. So these days, except of the United States, other countries does not really require any registration of the works and does not require to provide any kind of copyright notice. But it's quite normal, quite popular. It's more or less the standard because of the history. So when you purchase some DVD, or you purchase some CD disc, or you purchase a book, or you download something from the internet, you might find various kind of copyright notices. You might find a CN circle with a name of right holder, with a year of publication. So you have the practice in this field. So when we look on these two approaches, should we provide copyright protection to the result of to the works which has been generated by AI technologies, or we should just leave it more as in public domain? So what is my view on this issue is that, well, I think that so far the AI technology is still not in the level that it might acquire a legal capacity, that it might be considered a subject of legal relationships, because it's not only about the rights, it's also about the liability. And that's the main issue. So that's the rights comes with the liability. That's the reason why minors are usually considered that their legal capacity is limited, and they have legal guardians. Their parents more or less protect their interests, because minors might not have sufficient mental capacity to really understand legal consequences of their activities. So minors are not able to sell their land, for example, to sell their house. Minors are more or less capable, for example, we consider that minors still have certain legal capacity or mental capacity to understand when they go somewhere to a shop to purchase, for example, a sandwich, or to purchase some onigiri, that for this kind of purposes, to enter into this contract, that their capacity is more or less sufficient. But for some kind of more complicated contractual relationships, that their legal capacity is limited, and their interest should be protected by someone else. Usually those are the parents, or they might have some appointed legal guardian. So this is the situation also of persons with certain kind of mental diseases. So from my perspective, when we look on the current AI technologies, well, there is still certain time that that the technology come to the point that it will be self-conscious, that the current AI technology which is used is more or less as a box where you throw something and something go out. But the AI technology is not really conscious. It's not really thinking what it's creating. When we look on, for example, on the Japanese copyright law requires that the copyrighted works should be the expressions of sentiments, that it should express sentiments. And definitely the currently used AI technologies, it's difficult to argue that they have some sentiments, that they express certain sentiments. So to consider AIs as a copyright holder, as an entity, as a legal subject, so we will still have to wait. Well, from my perspective, I think that, well, it will take a couple of decades. So it's not really something which will occur tomorrow. So that's we more or less can put aside and look on the current situation, what kind of technology is currently used. And we can find very similar discussions 150 years ago, when first cameras, first photographic devices has been introduced. And at the time, there was always comparison between painters and photographers, that the painter had to paint a certain view, while the photographer just pushed the button and everything was done by the mechanics and by certain chemical processes. And there was argument that, well, there's no creativity on the perspective of photographer, that everything is done by the camera. The photographer is not painting anything. But the courts came to the conclusion that in case of photographers, still photographer has to really make certain creative decisions. The photographer has to take certain angle, set up certain lights, and that these creative decisions are sufficient for photographer to acquire copyright protection to the results, to photographs. And this brings us to AI technology then. Well, when we look on AI technologies, there are different types of machine learning used in AI technologies. So in those which use supervised machine learning, or the type of machine learning where there is certain human input, so we can more or less compare the situation to the photographer, where the photographer pushed the button and he still makes certain decisions about the angle, about the light, about the speed, and so on. So the same is in case of using AI technologies, that you might have still human input, especially in pre-production selection of the data, that someone has to create this data set or has to select what kind of works will be used for machine learning. In addition, there might be certain kind of instructions from the side of the user that, for example, I want to have a male, or I want to have some figure, female figure, or I want to have a young person, old person, I want to have something there. So you might have this kind of instructions which might affect the results. So the same as it was, for example, with Dave Buck project, that they just selected the Buck's choral compositions. If they select different kind of compositions, the result might be slightly different. So especially in these stages, if there is a human input, there would be no problem to compare it with photographers. Photographers still make certain kind of decisions of the angle, of the light, of the speed, and so on. The problem might be in the last aspect, where the human input is mainly in post-production. That because AI technology can generate a huge amount of the works, so those might be thousands of works generated within 1 hour or even shorter period of a time. And it's impossible to market all those creation, that there might be some kind of post-production selection. And if there is a human input in that, that might be more or less one of the aspects. The problem from copyright law, that it usually does not recognize this involvement in post-production. But currently, when you look on the photographers, professional photographers, how they work, when they have shooting, they shoot thousands of photos, and at the end, they just select the best one, where the light was the best, and so on. But even with photographs, when we go to a lot of copyright systems, even the photographs which are not very creative, so-called snapshots, the shots which snapshots which has been taken by individuals traveling. For example, you go somewhere to a park, you want to make a photo of Momiji. A lot of time people are not very thinking. They just think, I want to have photo here, I want to have myself, and behind me something. And they don't really think so much. They just push the button and make a lot of photos. So these not highly creative works, still copyright law provides them with protection. That what is sufficient is more or less push the button. And even going further, that we have sound recordings, where in case of sound recordings, no creativity is required, that what is sufficient is just to initiate a recording or push the button on the recorder. So the current copyright law more or less recognizes the situations, and we can more or less use those current institutions in analogy to AI technologies, that we can more or less accommodate them to the situation, either of making photographs or even make sound recording, where in case of sound or audiovisual recordings, no creativity is required. The person who initiate the recording or who make this recording is the right holder. So that might be the same with AI technology, that the person who initiates generation of the works by AI technologies, that he should be held as a right holder. So what we can do is, well, we can use it as by analogy, or the current law. It would not be very difficult to change the current law and adjust it, because we have already something similar. So it would not mean any kind of revolution in this field, and it would not bring all the issues dealing with legal capacity, whether the AI should be the right holder, or whether the AI has really the mental capacity and is able to exercise its rights, or whether the AI needs any right. So when we really perceive AI as a tool for creation, the person who initiates, the user of AI technologies, might be the right holder of the copyrights to the results generated by AI technologies. And it will also avoid this kind of, some of the authors are criticizing that the engineer should not be the right holders. More or less, the users might be the right holders. And it might more or less clarify the whole situation. There is also very interesting, in Germany, there was a study conducted by Max Planck Institute, where they were asking respondents what they think, how the result of AI technologies should be treated. So should AI technology be treated as an author, or should someone else receive the credit? And they found out that, well, we have persons who think that AI technology should be treated equally as humans. And on the other side, you had also respondents who were saying that, well, the engineers should be the persons who really should be credited for the results. Or, for example, the curators, some artists involved in those projects, should be credited for those creations. But what they found out is that what really matters is how the creation is more or less presented. If the creation is presented that AI has generated or has created this painting, a lot of respondents really perceive that AI should be treated equally as humans. But when you present that, well, you had engineers who designed this system which was used for creation of certain artistic works. So in that case, usually the respondents think that, well, the engineer should be the persons who should be really credited for that. They are the person without whom the result could not be achieved. And if you present the result that in this project, you had the artists who were involved and who were responsible for selecting the works and so on, and that at the end, often the respondents are saying that the artists, without those artists, the work would not be achieved. So that what often happens, the factor which affects really the judgment of the situations, is the way how the whole process of creation is presented. And this might really significantly affect also the legal implication of when we are judging how the works generated by AI technology should be treated. So what might be also important to point out, that what is in this discussion is often overlooked, is that AI is not really good in creative tasks, that AI is very good in standardized tasks. AI is very good at analyzing large data sets. AI is not really very good in in setting some new trends, or coming with new types of paintings, or coming with new types of themes used for the paintings, and so on. AI is very good for searching commonalities or differences, to searching for factors affecting variations in data sets. And this is very good. This is the area where the AI can be used. And I personally think that the AI in the near future, that the highly creative authors does not need to be worried, that AI will be used more in the works of so-called applied works of art. So the works which we use on daily basis, for example, various kind of design of tapestries, or some kind of background music you can hear in supermarkets. So this is the area where AI can really use its strength, that it can identify what is pleasing for customers, how this music is affecting the customers, and to generate something similar to those trends. So this is the area where AI might have a huge room for application. We will not really, in the near future, that you will not have new Harry Potter generated by AI technology, but definitely you might find AI technology generating, for example, design of the cars, or really design of tapestries, design of some patterns used for clothes. So this is the area where definitely the AI can be used in the future. The other aspect is that the fashion and customer tastes are changing, that they are often irrational, that it's very difficult to predict what the fashion or the taste of the customer will be next season or next year, where often we have various either designers or recently you have various kind of influencers, online influencers, who are affecting the customer's taste. So this is not the area where AI can really thrive. Another aspect is that, well, in a lot of literary and artistic works, there is so-called superstar phenomenon, that only a small percentage of authors are able to live from their creative endeavors. And that even with this superstar, that only a small percentage of their works is really highly profitable. The superstar always also guarantee the success of the works. So that's the reason why when you have movies, in movies you have always very successful actors. And if some actor does produce a couple of movies which has not been commercially successful, his career is more or less ended. So that's the reason why often the whole superstar phenomenon is used either in music or in various kind of cinematographic works. And another aspect which is often overlooked is that there is always created some artificial scarcity. That often the composers, or let's say music groups, singers, that they are encouraged by their producers or even by record labels not to produce too much. That it's not worth to, let's say, produce album every 6 months, so that there should be at least 1.5 years a gap, that there should be some scarcity. Otherwise, the market will be saturated. The same is also with painters. Often the galleries or famous collectors advise young artists that they should not produce too much, that they should just produce, for example, 4 or 5 paintings a year, in order to make scarcity, because if they produce huge amount of the works, the prices will go down, that the market will be overflooded by those works, and there will not be enough customers willing to pay higher prices. And this goes against the AI. In case of AI, well, there's no no scarcity. The AI can generate huge amount of the works, can more or less flood the whole market, and the result will be that prices will go down. So I think I will just more or less skip the issues dealing with the enforcing. So this is more or less dealing with YouTube, the use of AI technology for more or less policing the situation on YouTube, that identifying which works are copyright infringing and so on, where it is often used in the way that the copyright law is more or less over enforced. Although the AI technology can learn over a certain period of time to use various kind of exceptions like fair use, private copying, and so on. But the current situation is that, well, all these exceptions are more or less ignored, and the rights are really enforced in very strong way. But there is a future for AI, either to use for the analyzing of the facts of the law, or even you might have some really the online digital dispute settlement, where the machines can settle various kind of dispute in very quick and very cheap way. So that might be more or less progress. But what I want to point out in my last few minutes is that, well, the current situation significantly might affect in the future, and really in the near future might affect the human creativity, might affect the way the content of copyrighted works. And this is affected by the recent trends in the copyrighted work distribution, which focuses mainly on online music or video streaming, where there is so-called network effect. So you have one large distributor, and usually the winner is the entity which has more subscribers. The larger more subscribers you have, it will attract other subscribers to come. So you have one or two or three leading distribution network, and there's not a lot of competition between themselves. And recently, a lot of these online streaming services has entered into the area of producing. So either producing new sound recordings or producing new movies. So you have movies or you have TV dramas, which has been produced by Netflix or produced by Apple for the video streaming services. And the problem here is that often the services use the consumers' data preferences. So they have a lot of data, how the consumers are consuming this content online, that what kind of movies or what kind of music they like, and how they watch them, whether they watch them from the beginning to the end, or they watch them, for example, for 15 minutes and they just stop and start watching something else. So this might, they have a lot of information about the way how consumers are consuming either sound recordings or movies. And this might affect the way of their new productions when they are financing new creative projects. So they might use this data for determining that what they want, what kind of movie should be produced, what should be the condition, how long should be this movie, what should be the story, whether there should be more or characters, or there should be one character, whether there should be some ethnic proportion and so on, which can be affected by this data which are analyzed by AI technologies. So there has been already certain evidence in pornographic industry. So we have not seen it so far in the mainstream industry, but this might be the future. And this might lead to the way that what will be produced only those works which are in mainstream, which might lead to the lower cultural diversity, and it might lead to more variation on very similar topic in the similar style. So in the past, we could see it in the same way when you had some satellite broadcasting network. When they finance movies, they usually require that the movie should be around 90 minutes, because this is more or less segment fitting to the satellite broadcasting. So they usually set certain rules. Or you had it also with the recording. You had a lot of stories, for example, with Queen, when they recorded famous Bohemian Rhapsody. Their record label was more or less pushing on them that it's too long, that no radio will play it because it's too long. It was around 6 minutes. But the group just decided we want to go further. We think that this is the new type of the music, and they push for that. So the question is, to what degree these online streaming services, when they use the data, the automated systems for generating the requirements for the works, to what extent they will affect the creativity, or you will still have some kind of independent producers who will say, no, we don't want to go in mainstream. We want to produce something completely new, so something different from the mainstream. And that's the reason why, to a certain degree, although currently music and video movie industry, although the industry is concentrated, there is still a certain degree of cultural diversity, which is caused mainly by the factor of independent producers, either movie producers, or you might have independent producers of sound recordings. In the past, we had usually independent labels, or you had some independent studios. But a lot of these entities has been already purchased by main players. So you have a highly concentrated industry. In the past, usually you had the managers who were deciding what kind of movies they will distribute, what kind of sound recordings will be produced. But it was always about the individuals, about their experience. And there was still possibility of certain bargaining that, well, we want to do something new. The question, when everything will be automated, to what degree there will be possibility really to persuade someone, that it will be very difficult to persuade a machine which is creating various kind of playlists, which is showed to the subscribers. So to quickly sum up what I wanted to say today, that the currently AI is used for producing culture goods, but we don't need to be really worried that the AI technology will really substitute the artists, writers. That AI technology will significantly improve the current situation with endeavors with low-level creativity. So as I said, various kind of background music, various kind of design of the tapestries, certain textures of fabric used for fashion. So this is the area where low-level creative works will be substituted by AI technologies, but there will be still enough room for more creative works where the human aspect will be very important. Where we should be more worried is the current situation with all these online and video streaming services, which are very concentrated. So you have 1, 2, 3 major players, and if they use AI technology for determining their playlists and for producing new types of movies or new sound recordings, so this might significantly lead to lower cultural diversity unless there will be some kind of independent human aspects. So there will be some kind of independent producers which might be able to enter into the creative process and affect it to a certain degree. So as to the impact on copyright law, I don't really see a huge problem why copyright law should not be able to accommodate it. So we can use AI as tool and use really in a comparable way to current situation of treating photographs or sound recordings. What is the problem, as I said, might be the use of AI technology for enforcing copyright law can lead to the narrowing of copyright exceptions. This is really the current situation on YouTube, where a lot of producers of new content, which is based on previous content, all those mashup results. So when someone really cut parts of the movies or combine certain pieces, make some collages, often they receive takedown notices that those videos are infringing some rights of the right holders. You had even situations where when someone say few words, mention some famous group, that all those videos are more or less blacklisted. So this really lead that AI technology as is currently used in copyright enforcement can lead to really to significant narrowing of copyright exception. So that's all what I wanted to say for today. And I think we have still enough time for receiving a couple of questions.